Hello everyone and welcome to the Hoy and Rackwick Evening, part of the Orkney International Science Festival. My name is Rebecca Marr and I work at Hoy Heritage Centre in Hoy, and I'm really looking forward to taking you all over to visit the island tonight. So we're going to start our journey by getting on the MV Grahamsea here in Stromness. And as we make the journey tonight, we're going to use some archive photographs from the Hoy archive to take us there. It looks like some people have already got on the boat before us. There's Max, Sir Peter Maxwell Davis, the famous composer, along with Elizabeth Bevan. The boat we're getting tonight is the MV Grahamsea. And there's been many different boats over the years that have plied the waters between Stromness and Moaness pier, and many of them have been known simply as Stevie's boat, skippered by Stevie Mowat. So we're leaving Stromness now, and we can see it receding there in the distance. And up ahead of us here, we can see Hoy, our destination for this evening. And here we are, sailing past the island of Grahamsea. Maybe we'll stop and pick up a few of the Grahamsea Islanders to come over to Hoy for tonight. Up ahead I can see that we're approaching Moaness pier, drawing into it. And here we are, we've arrived at the pier. Here's some Hoy folk come down to meet the boat. There's Isaac Moore, he was a post office master. And here's some more local folk picking up their supplies off the Grahamsea. They'll be joining us later as we head up to Hoy Kirk. Moaness pier has changed over the years. In fact, it wasn't always where it is now. But we've been fortunate tonight with the weather. Some nights it can be fairly coarse. So we've got off the boat and moved up the pier, and now we're going to walk up the road here towards Hoy Kirk. On the right you can see Borough House or the Manse, and Sir Walter Scott visited there in 1814, but we're not going to stop there tonight. We're going to keep heading up the road towards the kirk. The Hoy Kirk was built in 1891, and there it nestles below Ward Hill. It was bought by the community in 2003 and turned into a heritage centre and community venue. Inside you can find lots of archive materials, exhibitions, films to watch, audios to listen to, a whole wealth of information to get lost in, and you can make yourself a cup of tea as well. You're all settled in now. We're going to serve you some lentil and seaweed soup. Or rather, that's what we would normally do. So we've left you the recipe on the Science Festival website so you can make it for yourself. But look, if you look in the front row, you can see in a blue t-shirt, that's Dan Lee. He's going to be speaking to us later about Rackwick. But while you're enjoying your soup, settle in and let's watch a film about a man who lived at the Boo. And this is Jimmy the Boo's Polka, and the story is told by his family.
I'm Jean Thomson. I live at the Brae, and my grandfather was James Sinclair, and he lived here before me. He was known as Jimmy the Boo. He was a very well-liked man in the community, very outstanding person. Well known in the parish for lots of things that he was involved in, as well as his music. He played here at the Boo for 60 years. great-great-grandchildren have come here to play in the barn and play the fiddle that my grandfather played. He would have been really pleased to have seen his great-great-granddaughter Iona Spence play the fiddle that he played on. And her sister Sophie and her brother Oscar, along with my grandchildren James Watson and Jake and Bee. My grandfather would have played at weddings and funerals. He also played up at orgel, up at their barn. They just really enjoyed music. People have travelled from 20 miles away just to hear him. They would have food and ale and all sorts of things like that. Them days, that was what they did. They relaxed after all their hard work. He would be very proud if he saw them today. And he would really have enjoyed it to be standing there at the mill where he played the fiddle himself and see them there playing the tune that he composed. I hope this continues through their families as well, because it's all a throwback to their great-great-grandfather, Jimmy the Bull.
Lovely. With that music ringing in our ears, we're going to head over to Rackwick to meet up with Dan, and we're going to use a particular type of transport to get there tonight. In the days before motorised transport, when horses and carts were still in regular use to carry the mail, Hoy's own mail cart, pulled by bullock, was perhaps unique, and it was nicknamed the Hoy Express. It was the only type of vehicle capable of traversing the rough terrain. The two communities are linked by the old road running past Sandy Loch between Ward Hill and the Coolags, and that'll take us down into the valley of Rackwick. Here we are now in the Rackwick Valley, and I'd like to hand over to archaeologist Dan Lee.
Rackwick is located on the western side of Hoy in a broad bay at the head of two large U-shaped glacier-worn valleys with immense cliffs towering either side. It is surrounded by some of the highest hills in Orkney, tucked away, with an outlook across to mainland Scotland, across the Pentland Firth. Rackwick has a long history, reflected in the numerous buildings, ruins and earthworks around the township. Once a thriving place in the late 19th century, where life was hard but the community got by, population decline and the closure of the school almost resulted in an abandonment in the 1960s, with Jack Rendell the sole inhabitant for a couple of winters. But renewed interest by writer George Mackay-Brown, composer Peter Maxwell Davis and artist Sylvia Wishart, the hard work of the Rendell family and second homeowners gave Rackwick a renaissance and a new lease of life at the end of the 20th century. Since Mackay-Brown listed the abandoned Rackwick croft houses in an Orkney tapestry in 1969, the township has embraced change and found a future. Evidence for prehistoric activity remains elusive within Rackwick, despite the Neolithic tomb at the Dwarfy Stone up the valley, and prehistoric settlements on the north and east coast of Hoy. Some low mounds were identified during the Rackwick survey, but these are likely to be the remains of former peat stacks. Two small rectangular enclosures were located on the eastern side of the Rackwick burn. They are marked on the 1882 Ordnance Survey map and are likely to have been planticrues. These were small enclosures used for growing cabbage seedlings. However, they bear a striking resemblance in size and form to the enclosed square barrows identified at Groups, Braebuster, in the northeast of Hoy. It is possible that these examples in Rackwick are contemporary with the Braebuster monuments. Rackwick is first mentioned in Lord Sinclair's 1492 rental of Orkney, where it is listed together with Beneath the Hill, an area to the east of Ward Hill, for land tax. In Lord Sinclair's 1497 to 1503 rental, Rackwick is listed separately for land tax payments on 3 penny lands in butter and meat. Similar payments are listed in the 16th to 18th century rentals and indicate that the tax had changed little in 300 years, suggesting that the township remained much the same size and population. Rackwick is first depicted with any accuracy on Mackenzie's maritime navigation map of Orkney, dated 1750. No detail is shown for the township, other than a line between heather and grass areas on the slope of Morfee. Rackwick did not have a head dyke, a bank separating the infield and the outfield, and animals were tethered. A map of Rackwick dating to 1791 provides the earliest known detailed depiction of the township. It shows the older part of the township to the northwest of a small drainage ditch which enters the sea near the Noost. Farms are labelled as Crow's Nest, Glen, Mount, Ruin, Midhoose, Scar, Group, North and South Queem, Mucklehoose, Newhoose by the shore. Only one house is depicted on the western side of the drainage ditch, north of Green Hill. Deep soils and cultivation terraces, which are steep edges formed downslope of a ploughed field, were found in the northwestern part of the township and correspond with the location of the older farms. Together, these cultivation terraces demonstrate a long history of agricultural activity and manuring of the land in this early part of the township. The 1791 map confirms that all of the farms to the east of the drainage ditch date to the very late 18th and early 19th centuries, and demonstrates the growth of the township after this time. As the rentals suggest, the older part of the township remained about the same size for several hundred years until the late 19th century. The first edition Ordnance Survey map of 1882 shows a very similar distribution of farms that survive today. By the late 19th century, numerous farms have taken land to the east of the drainage burn, bound by the larger Rackwick burn. Lower Rummin, Sandy Braes, Backdyke, the Park, Windbreck, Muirs, Green Hill and Burnmouth are all depicted. Field systems, enclosures, small structures and trackways are evident. Notably, Ruin has been renamed Quernstones, and Moss and Rummin are new additions on the original township area. Farm names apparently moved with families, and the Glen name has since moved to the school area with the Rendell family. Many of the structures, enclosures, planticrues, walls and earthworks associated with these farmsteads were among the 174 sites recorded during the Archaeological Survey in 2014-15, which for the first time has created a comprehensive record of the archaeology and built heritage of Rackwick. The remains of the township Noost are located above the high water mark below the Shaw House at the western end of Rackwick Bay. The site was recorded using a plane table during the Rackwick Archaeological Survey. This simple but effective survey technique records the main structural features and the top and base of slopes to create a measured plan. Stony earthworks are evident along a 16-metre stretch of the shore, with walling visible at the northwestern end likely to be the remains of a fisherman's hut. A scale plan of the site was produced from the survey, showing the structures and slopes that are visible on the ground surface. The remains of a built structure are clearly visible built into the slope. A fish house is marked in this location on the 1791 plan by the shore. A rectangular structure is marked, which presumably corresponds to the walls that were recorded during the measured survey. The structure, however, is not marked on the 1882 Ordnance Survey map and may have fallen out of use by the late 19th century. Boat-shaped hollows, common at most noose sites, are not visible. However, parts of the boat winch survive, and stones dripped with black tar from sealing vessels and creels were visible along this part of the shore. Similar tarred stones are also evident on the beach adjacent to Burnmouth, suggesting boats were also hauled up in this area as well. The Noost is accessed by a steep trackway down to the beach. A deeper channel is still evident in the lower Storm Beach below the Noost, where boats access the sea. Boats would have been hauled up, and the catch of large cod, ling and halibut were unloaded on the shore. The remains of the winch still lies in the grass. Historical photographs show a row of 8 boats in the Noost in the early 20th century, with the shore house in the background. The fish house was certainly a ruin by this time, but the winch is visible. The channel through the beach boulders is clearly maintained. A second historical photograph of the Noost looking towards the Two of the Head shows a group of 8 fine boats in good condition, apart from an older one at the back, 7 of which look like yawls, one with the registration number K8. The winch is clearly operational and the track down to the shore is visible. Another historical photograph from a postcard shows a boat and crew in the Noost Channel amongst the large beach boulders, having just returned with their catch. Those were the days when fish were still up to 1 metre in length, and the one here is apparently a halibut. According to the late Jack Rendell, there were 5 boats using the Noost during World War II, 3 dinghies and 2 yawls, and the last boat was there in the early 1970s. The Noost still stand as a testament to Rackwick's important links to the sea. Folklore sites were recorded during the Rackwick Archaeological Survey, where places in the landscape could be linked with stories. Many of these are mentioned by John Bremner in his book, Hoy, the Dark Isle, and some still form significant landmarks today. One thing is for certain, the valleys either side of Rackwick could be dangerous places at the wrong time, and contained supernatural beings and powerful places that could catch an unwary farmer travelling up the valley road. There are giants associated with the Dwarfy Stone and Boogie's Cairn in the valley of the South Burn. A waterhorse or nuggle frequented the Little Loch just to the south of Rackwick, where the route of the old road to Longhope begins the climb into the Hoy Hills at Runsigill. When the unfortunate who saw a waterhorse climbed upon their back, they would charge into the water and drown the rider. There is a healing spring on the side of Ward Hill, and the usual stories of witches and trowels and unmarked sailors' graves along the shore. One intriguing story is Dead Boy's Grave, which consists of a thin strip of green grass amongst the brown heather partway up the very steep east-facing side of Clicknafee, the hill to the north of Rackwick. It is easily distinguished amongst the short heather and grass as a lush green area on the hillside. The site was obviously a significant local landmark in the late 18th century, as it is depicted and actually labelled Dead Boy's Grave on the 1791 map of Rackwick. This is the first tangible evidence for the story, other than the tale itself, and it is fascinating to see it marked on the old estate map. The grave, as the name suggests, is reputedly where a boy is buried, having been chased up the hill by Rackwick residents after he jumped from a disease-ridden ship anchored in the bay. Another story associated with the site is that the boy was caught escaping the press gangs. The fact that the grave is depicted on the late 18th century map suggests that the press gang story has been conflated from other tales. Archaeological excavation and geophysical survey would be impractical at the site due to the very steep rocky slope. Curiously, and some would say inevitably, during a heather fire along this side of the valley a few years ago in 2010, Dead Boy's Grave was the only unburnt green patch on the hillside left untouched by the ravages of the fire. There are several ruinous farmsteads in Rackwick beyond those which are still inhabited today. Some old houses have completely disappeared, the stone likely used for other building projects over the years. The remains of a farmstead, known as Ebby Manson's, are evident in the field to the south of Winbreck in Muirs, seen in this historical photograph as a ruin in front of the haystacks at Winbreck in the early 20th century. Today the site consists of a low, oval stony bank with a substantial wall on the north-eastern side. There is an enclosure to the north with several spreads of stone that could have been former structures. The house is depicted on the 1882 Ordnance Survey map, but had largely been demolished by the 20th century when it is shown in the photograph here. Perhaps one of the most intriguing stories in Rackwick is that associated with a small ruinous house located on the slope to the west of Glen, known as the house that was built in a day. The house is reputedly built in a single day by the community for a newlywed couple around 1850 to avoid paying tax. It has not been inhabited within living memory and was used as a chicken shed during the war. The house is shown on the 1882 Ordnance Survey map as a single building located within an area of rough and apparently unimproved land. Detailed recording of the house that was built in a day was undertaken during the Rackwick Archaeological Survey. This consisted of a plane table survey resulting in a scale plan, a written description and photographic record. The house is small and simple in layout. It is single-storey with one internal room and is now roofless. It measures 5.5 metres long, 4 metres wide and nearly 3 metres in height. The single room has a doorway facing to the southwest. Internally, rubble covers the floor from the partial collapse of the north-eastern wall, and there is a small alcove in the northwestern gable end. Alcoves were common features in old Orkney houses and were used for storage. There is no chimney or lum, so there would have been a central hearth in the middle of the floor in this small and smoky room. No internal fixtures or fittings survive, save for the alcove and a metal hook outside the door that was perhaps used for hanging a lamp. Even though the house was built rapidly, it appears to have been lived in for some time at least. The inhabitants made improvements and added structures to the outside. A stone-built boundary wall runs along the northern side, which displays 3 construction phases, showing that improvements were made over time. The remains of a small roofed lean-to structure, perhaps used as a peat store, abut the northern gable end. There is also a small drainage ditch cut into the ground just upslope from the house to divert surface water away. Stories of a house built in a day, or a one-night house, are not common in Orkney, and they are better known in Wales, where they are called tai unos. In Wales, it was widely believed that if a house was built in one night on some waste ground, the freehold right to the small area around the house was gained. It was important that smoke passed up the chimney and a door was in place by daybreak. Friends and relatives were drafted in to help, having gathered the materials beforehand, often in secret. The circumstances surrounding the Rackwick one-night house are not clear, other than it was built by Rackwick folk to help a newlywed couple. It doesn't appear that they lived there for long. Elsewhere in Hoy, a group of small houses said to have been for the poor to the south of Booth at Cantic, South Walls, may have also been built in this way. It is not clear how widespread and when the tradition dates to in the UK, and there is little literature on the subject. Sayce writes in the Folklore journal in 1942 that there is no evidence for the practice in Old Welsh law. Sayce writes, "It appears to be a folk practice and to have no other sanction than common feeling that it was right and just. The practice was well known in Cornwall and occurred in Hampshire and in Ireland, but apparently not in the eastern parts of England and Scotland. In the west of Scotland, however, the practice was common in Lewis, the Hebrides, and along the west coast. An account of the practice from Stornoway brings the added notion that if the hearth fire is kept alight, the new tenant cannot be evicted. This has links to older traditions surrounding the significance of the central hearth and could be one of the reasons that the fire was extinguished by factors when tenants were evicted." Whatever the circumstances around the house that was built in a day in Rackwick, it is the only known example in Orkney and remains a small ruin on the hillside with a very intriguing story. Given the perceived remoteness of Rackwick, the township is actually well connected and has been since the beginning of the 20th century. A communication cable came ashore at Rackwick during World War I to a building on the shore known as the Test House. The cables then ran above ground through the Rackwick Burn Valley. You can see them in this early 20th century photograph taken along the old Rackwick Road on the lower slopes of the Ward Hill. Some of the poles were date-stamped 1916 and they were numbered. The poles were used to make steps during path restorations in 1988. The cable took signals from the Scottish mainland to the Navy fleet in Scapa Flow during World War I. Some telegraph poles can still be found lying in the heather next to the old Rackwick Road if you look closely. Two modern subsea electrical power cables make landfall in Rackwick. Both are marked by yellow markers on the green hill and at the southeastern end of the bay. These carry power from the Scottish mainland to Orkney and start a loop of high voltage lines that link up the isles. Near to Glen, which housed the former shop, and the youth hostel, which was the former school, there is a K6 red telephone box. The telephone box is shown in the left-hand side of this historical photograph, which is likely to date to the mid-20th century. A resident of Glen is shown sitting in a chair, and the house looks newly built. The telephone no longer works and is not a BT standard model. The door has recently become detached and the paint is fading and peeling. Like so many of the red telephone boxes throughout our towns and countryside in the UK, they are technology in obsolescence, quietly slipping away. Mobile phones and Wi-Fi capacity have made phone boxes obsolete, and many are being removed by BT or reused for community libraries or defibrillators. If those telephone box walls could talk, it would be fascinating to listen to the conversations of Rackwick residents, climbers and visitors with the outside world. The Old Man of Hoy is a large 137-metre high sea stack on the west coast of Hoy, between St John's and Rora Head. An early drawing from the late 18th, early 19th century shows the stack detached from the main cliff, with an arch and foot on the cliffside. This has since collapsed, perhaps in the 19th century. The stack has remained largely unchanged during the 20th and 21st centuries, and owes its stability to an underlying seam of basalt rock. The first recorded climb of the Old Man was by Chris Bonington and his team in 1966, although there are folk stories about earlier climbers reaching the top. Bonington's team decided to climb the stack again the following year and filmed the ascent with the BBC in July 1967. This was the first BBC outside broadcast and very audacious for the time due to the distance of Orkney from BBC headquarters and the remote location of the site in Hoy. The army were engaged to help with the operation and brought large amounts of equipment to the island by sea on vehicle transporters. These landed at Longhope Pier and were driven up the island to Rackwick. A base camp was established in Rackwick adjacent to Lower Rummin, and the abandoned farmhouse was cleared out to use as a cookhouse. Tents were pitched in the adjacent field to the south. The outside broadcast equipment was transported several kilometres to an encampment on the cliff top adjacent to the sea stack. It was taken the shortest route and dragged up the Rackwick Burn Valley using large tractors and winched up the valley side between Clicknafee and Grutfee, then driven down the slope to the cliff top camp. They left a real mess. There was concern by residents at the time about the damage caused to the moorland from transporting the equipment, and the tracks can still be seen today. The tracks and drag lines were recorded during the Rackwick Archaeological Survey. Just before the ascent, the cliff-top camp was hit by a gale, scattering tents across the area and waterlogging equipment. Luckily, valve equipment can be dried out. Despite the challenges, the outside broadcast was a success, and 15 million viewers watched the live ascent on the 8th to 9th of July 1967. A documentary was made by the BBC to mark the 25th anniversary of the climb in the 1990s, which can still be watched online. The Clifftop Camp and Rackwick Base Camp were surveyed during the Rackwick Archaeological Survey. Little evidence for the Clifftop Camp can be found. The Rackwick Base Camp, however, had reused a World War II gun emplacement at Rummin. A metal detector survey recovered rusted iron objects from the war, but also a toothpaste tube, buried wrappers and bottle caps, which could date to the BBC broadcast camp. A scatter of aluminium can ring pools around a concrete foundation suggested that there was the presence of an even later activity phase at the site. It soon became apparent that this was the site of the Rackwick snack van, which served drinks and food to residents and visitors during the summer in the 1970s and early 1980s. The van was later removed and scrapped. Photographs from 1973 show Rackwick residents and visitors enjoying some tabnab in the warm Hoy summer sun.
Thanks, Dan. That was a fascinating talk, and there's lots more you can find out about Dan's work. His survey can be found on the Hoy Heritage website. But look, we're going to run out of time. We're going to miss that ferry. So let's head down and catch it. Here it is. Let's get aboard and wave farewell to Hoy, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.